Well,
Yeah, I see. I can see perfect without my glasses.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
All right, I suspect we're live this morning. So we will open the meeting for Wednesday, July 5th, 2017 of the Hutchinson City Council. Please call roll.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Here.
Soldner?
Here.
Inskeep?
Here.
Deckent?
Here.
Daveline?
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, Pastor Darrell Peterson. Good morning, Darrell.
Good morning. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly and most gracious Father, we just thank you for this great nation of America. We thank you, Lord God, for the foundation it was built upon. And Father, we just thank you for the great city of Hutchinson. We thank you, Lord God, for the foundation. And Father, we thank you for a greater foundation. That, Father, your word says that in God we trust. We thank you, Lord God, that this city will develop greater measures of trusting in you. And Father, we just thank you for today, for this meeting, that this meeting will help build a greater and better faith in Hutchinson. And Father, the things that are done, the things that are progressive down the street, down the road, and that, Father, it becomes greater and better. Thank you for these things in that precious name of Jesus. And they all said, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Darrell. Next item.
Item 4A, a proclamation for Parks and Recreation Month.
All right, if I can invite Amy Conklin and is Justin Combs here to the podium there, we'll present our proclamation this morning. Welcome, guys. Glad to see you all back. Come on up here. This is Amy Conklin with the Hutchinson Recreation Commission, and of course Justin Combs, Director of our Parks and Facilities. So we'll present this proclamation, and then please make some comments if you'd like to about the occasion. Whereas Parks and Recreation programs are an integral part of the communities throughout this country, including the city of Hutchinson. And whereas our Parks and Recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And Parks and Recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas Parks and Recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And Parks and Recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And whereas Parks and Natural Recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And our Parks and Natural Recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and the City of Hutchinson recognizes the benefits derived from Parks and Recreation resources. Now, therefore, I, John Daveline, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of July as Parks and Recreation Month. Amy, Justin? Yes.
Thank you. Well, I'll keep it short because we're all tired from last night's festivities. Just on behalf of HUTREC, we'd like to thank the City of Hutchinson for your continued partnership with our initiatives of healthy living and community spirit. We are proud to be the community's recreation provider, and I think you guys will find us going beyond just the basic recreation services. We're really embracing not just doing recreation activities that may be like a 6-week T-ball league or an 8-week adult sports league or an event here and there, but really embracing the everyday healthy living lifestyle through our initiatives of neighborhood development, of community spirit, and festivals that we're becoming involved with. So we would just like to thank you for your continued support of Parks and Recreation, especially with Hutch Rec's involvement in our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. I'd like to echo Amy's comment and just thank City Council and City Manager for the support of Parks and for Recreation. I'm sure I said this last year and probably the year before, but we celebrate this once a month or once a year, but really any month could be Parks and Recreation Month. If you look at the diversity of the programming that Hutch Rec offers and the diversity of activities you can do in the parks, really pick a month and there's definitely activities. But again, thank you for your support and look forward to continuing to work with Hutch Rec over the next several years. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you both.
Appreciate it. All right, next item.
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
This is the time we set aside for those in the audience to come forth and present any topics, 3 to 5 minute, on items that are not on the agenda and related to the community. So anybody in the audience this morning? Good morning, Dave.
Hey, Susan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Susan Sankey. I'm with the Kansas State Fair. Normally I'm before you a little period earlier than I am now, but I've had some family situations that have kept me away and have resulted in me being really behind. So anyway, I'm glad to be here this morning, really to thank you as the community of Hutchinson on behalf of the Kansas State Fair and the Kansas State Fair Board. Last year we had a great fair. It was third highest attendance on record, 359,808 people. So in the last 5 years, we've enjoyed 2 record, maybe 3 record years when you count those for the history of the fair that's been recorded. So we're really thankful for that. We're grateful for the support that we get from Hutchinson and the community. I've had some great conversations with your city engineer on some projects that we look forward to. And I wanted to express that gratitude. Last year we also had about 30,000 entries, and with each one of those entries we have people who come to the fair to represent those in addition to the general public that just comes to that event. A lot of my time recently has been spent on the new amusement ride legislation that the Kansas legislature passed that impacts us in some significant ways, and it went into effect July 1 in spite of a delay that I think was anticipated but really didn't happen. So we're really trying to go through a ride-by-ride analysis right now with the Department of Labor and make sure that we have everything in order. Fortunately, as a fair, we've always taken safety as a priority and very seriously, so it's a pretty smooth transition for us, except for going through all the paperwork and the documentation and everything that the new legislation requires, and really having a good relationship with the Department of Labor, who's got the task to enforce that. So that's one thing that's occupied a lot of my time recently. Since last year's fair, we've updated our website. We have a complete website update. We're also transitioning our ticketing platforms, which in addition to online ticket sales that we've had always, we have the opportunity for print-at-home tickets and mobile ticketing. So that's a new thing that the fair is going to have, and we're excited about that. It's going to be some learning curves for staff that's always done it a certain way, but hopefully everybody's up for that challenge, and we're looking forward to that being as smooth as possible. We've reviewed, and you've probably heard some information about it, the concepts that we have in place with our master plan, and I've met with the city manager about that. Just conceptually what we have designed so far and working on that, and hopefully we'll continue to make progress with what that master plan is going to look like for the Kansas State Fairgrounds to best represent the needs of the fair, the community, the state, and the region. Also last year we had a record number of non-fair events outside the 10 days of the state fair. We had, 568 events, which equal to 1,437 event days For example, the cattle show that we hosted just last week, all week long, we had people at the fairgrounds in Hutchinson, in the community, from 21 different states, 650 head of cattle. The weekend before that, we had Comic-Con and a couple of weddings, so I don't know how diverse it can get, besides cattle shows, the Smallville Comic-Con, and some weddings, and a wedding at Comic-Con. So our life is never dull, and we want to continue to serve the community as best we can. We have not in the past gotten tax dollars to support our operating budget, so we have to be smart about how we utilize our funds and how we host non-fair events outside the 10 days of the fair, and work with our staff so that we can manage that as best we can and use every part of our operating budget to our advantage. So with that, I just wanted to invite you to Kansas State Fair this year. Get your fair on. September 8th through the 17th. So with that, just wanted to, if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. But more than anything, to express our gratitude to you for being part of the community and, like I said, working with the city on easements and things like that that are a win-win for us through the Kansas State Fairgrounds and the community. We want to continue to be in those conversations and how we can continue to have the economic impact that we have to benefit the community and the state.
Susan, thank you very much for being here this morning. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And just a couple of comments. About a month or so ago, I had the opportunity to greet the National Cushman Rally group. They've
Great
been here
people.
3 times in the last 10 to 12 years. And several of the organizers told me that they said this is one of the best facilities throughout the country that they have their Cushman rallies. And they recognized the layout here. And so it's a real compliment to the Kansas State Fair that you're making that kind of an impression upon organizations all across the country. And they had a great time here. So here and then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to welcome the National Association of RVers. And this will be a national convention. And this is an African-American organization that will be here. And they are the most organized group. So you're getting a great attraction on national events. So congratulations for your good work.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Susan.
Yep.
All right, anyone else in the audience? All right, we'll move on to the next item.
Item 6, consent agenda.
I had one comment on the consent agenda. I noticed that Greg Benz was finishing his second term on the Housing Commission, and I know that he's not in the audience, but he's been such an integral part to that commission and has done so much to advocate for housing in the community, and just wanted to take a moment to thank him for his service the last 6 years. And I think he was also on the mayor's task force on housing prior to that. So I know he's put a lot of time in, and it's time to step off, and with 2 completed terms, and we welcome those who are replacing the others. But just wanted to take a moment to thank him.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda? Do we have a motion?
I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner. Yes. Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes.
Dave Lane.
Yes. Next item.
Item 7A, consider ordinance pledging future use of quarter-cent retailer sales tax revenue.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. You have before you the proposed ordinance for pledging the use of the quarter-cent sales tax. The renewal of the quarter-cent sales tax is identical to the previous issue. The pledging of these funds is identical as well, and has been for the last two elections. Questions from the council?
Can we deviate from the allotments? I'm not suggesting we do or don't. I'm just curious.
Yes.
Can we?
Yeah, it's your decision.
And the reason I ask is in these times of tough budgets and things like that, I've been reevaluating what I consider to be the city's focus, and different things like that. And I don't know if we can maybe, I don't know where we would go with that, but some of the future discussion we're going to have later in the agenda talks about some things that we found that we could cut from it. And I was wondering if we could reevaluate those numbers or if everybody's fine with those. I don't know that I have a proposal per se, but anybody else had any thoughts about the allotments?
Yeah, Dave, there was, earlier there was a committee representing the Kansas Cosmosphere and the Stratica, as well as the city. And John Deerdoff and Merrill and myself represented the city, and that discussion came up during those meetings. And I think the general reading is that the city certainly wanted to protect the 47% for streets and the 5% for 15%. I'm sorry, for property tax reduction. And I think the Cosmosphere and the Stratica folks did meet independent of that, and saw that that was the general feeling informally of the city representatives, and so that's kind of how we've landed where we are today in terms of there was not, to my knowledge, John, you were there, any suggestions that the Cosmosphere or the Stratica's proportion share be reduced in any way. So, and that's the way it was left at that point, just for a little background information.
I appreciate
what
that.
Those discussions entailed.
I know there was some talks of cutting out some of the street work that we were looking at for the next budget or whatever. So I didn't know if there was a opportunity to maybe increase. And again, I don't know where you take it from necessarily, and that's what warrants the discussion. But the street and side, I guess what I'm looking for is, a lot of the chatter I'm hearing on the street, is take care of what you got, and keep doing that. And things like that include street and sidewalk improvements. And so if we're cutting street and sidewalk in order to meet our budgetary restrictions or whatever, should we look at possibly bumping that number to do that? And this is just one man's opinion, is all I'm saying.
Dave, I'm glad you raised it. I didn't have similar thoughts that you did, but I think it is worth raising. Yeah, in my opinion, and you didn't offer a proposal, and thoughts I've got in response, we'd be looking either at the Cosmosphere or Stratica. The others are both related to expenses that we have.
Correct.
The street, sidewalk, and then property tax reduction. So I think that would be the discussion to be had, if any.
That's where I was seeing it from as well.
Yeah.
I don't think you mess with the property tax reduction and that. I didn't offer anything. I apologize, but but just conversation, if nothing else, just to hear others' thoughts.
We had, just in general, we, before this change back in, 2 elections ago, we had 50% of the funding going to streets instead of 47. And the Cosmosphere gave up 2%. We gave up 3% then for the 5% Stratica. But I think your point's well taken, in that we're going to talk later on about some issues and
Right.
kind of where we're at. And certainly this could play into that in some fashion.
That's kind of where I was looking. I didn't want to cart before horse, but I think this needs to be resolved potentially to lend itself to conversations we're going to have in a moment.
I don't disagree, but I do think it might be a little unfair to spring this on those two organizations without any kind of notice when they were here the last time, and it hasn't been brought up in prior conversations. With that being said, what does a 1% of that yield?
Let's see, I think it's 2 million total for the quarter cent.
Okay.
So is how much we generate.
So 20,000?
20,000
Yeah,
about.
for 1%, it's, it's a lot.
Yeah.
10% is going to be a couple $100,000. So.
I see.
my natural cynical nature says that if we cut into the Cosmosphere and Stratica, we'll lose the whole thing.
Interesting.
I think it's going to be a tough sell anyway this year, and I think that would be, with a certain segment of the community, I think that would be very a negative approach.
Yeah, I think what the group was trying to, that subgroup was trying to maintain the current level of funding. And that seemed to be the general consensus. We did not, as an informal group, advance any notion of changing those percentages. There were inferences that they would certainly like to be considered for more, and we basically said that's really off the table, and that wasn't speaking for the council, but for that subgroup there, and so that's how we've landed where we are today.
And remind me again, I should know this, but this is an extension for 5 years, correct?
Correct.
Or was- yeah, not, I know there was 5s, there was 10s historically. This is 5.
Well,
your feeling
in
that-
looking at the voting patterns of on the ballot questions, going back to the 4 previous ones, in '93, that was the first time that was presented to the voters. 50% city, 50% Cosmosphere. It passed by 54%. 54% approved it. Then in '97, 60%. And then in '08, 72%. And then in 12, 71%. So the voters obviously seem to be fairly comfortable with the current allocation. Times have changed,
Sure.
admittedly, Dave. Yeah, you're definitely right. Bring a valid point.
Do you have a proposal?
Well, not necessarily, and I'm kind of hearing, and again, this is why we have these open forums and conversations, because when you're sitting at home at night reading this and you're thinking, oh, I'm onto something here. I like to hear what other people's thoughts are as well. And you're right. I mean, it's a referendum of the people. This could all be moot if the
Yeah.
folks decide they don't want to continue this, which is certainly, everybody's right. So I guess I can make peace with the current level and go with there. But I did want to broach the subject anyways, at least.
Remind me how much we are cutting off streets this year in the proposal.
Well, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. I think we talked about that at our last study session. We were cutting a couple $100,000, $200,000 from the proposed 18 street
That's
program.
what I thought.
Yeah.
That would not be, this quarter-cent sales tax allocation would be protected, correct? It would
Yes,
not-
yeah.
This would be protected.
Right.
So the
That's
voters
coming out
should
of our
understand that would come out of
property tax supported
Property tax.
revenue to
Yeah.
the street program. That's correct.
Yeah, you look over time from the background that Merrill had provided. Since 1993, this quarter-cent sales tax, the city's invested over $20 million in our street program over this period of time. So it's an incredibly impressive amount of investment that the voters have approved, and for all the right reasons. So I think the city has certainly fulfilled our promise and our commitment over these many, almost 25 years.
Again, Dave, I think you raised a good point. And I
You
think
raised a good
that,
point.
we've talked about it in some of our budget study sessions, and my guess is that we'll be talking about it in future years.
All right.
I think we need to continue looking at both what we allot for infrastructure as well as quality of life issues, and because it is a balance. And I think this is an area that we shouldn't summarily dismiss. And I'm looking again at the Cosmosphere and Stratica, not the streets and the property tax. I mean, if we decrease the property tax here, we've just got to increase it someplace
Yeah.
else. So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
that's a squeezing a balloon thing. But again, I just think things need to be on the table, and this may or may not be the time. I'm not sure that I agree, Jay, that giving 5-6 months' notice isn't enough notice to, whether it's Cosmosphere or Stratica, to make some adjustments on what they might do. But
Well, not necessarily adjustments, but to advocate before the council their point of view.
good
Right.
point.
And the community.
Sure.
Yeah, and the community, yeah.
Because they're the only ones who are going to be advocating for this particular referendum. We don't
Mhm.
have that ability.
Yeah.
Right.
So and I'm not particularly pushing or proposing. Kind of wish maybe we'd had this thought.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks or so ago, and maybe massage it into the conversation.
I just bring them up as they come to me.
Yes.
Go for it.
Spontaneous thinker.
Eruption or something, exactly, yeah. Yeah, well, and again, I'm not, I don't have a proposal, and I'm not necessarily, unless someone else wants to make a proposal, suggesting that we do. But again, just when times are tough, we have to relook at everything, and revenue doesn't seem to be coming up. Expenses
Yeah.
are staying the same, and if we are going to cut, where do we cut? And is the quality of life and infrastructure, and re-examine the city's role. When times are good, I think we can spread the wealth and put it everywhere. But when times are tough, I think we have to be selective about where we place our funds, and that's the point I was trying to make.
Well, we tend to shy away. I'd suggest we think about maybe a 3% reduction in the Cosmosphere amount and a 1% in Stratica. If we did that, we could apply that to property tax relief, making that a 19%. Better get my glasses on. Yes. And according to the numbers that John mentioned, we'd be looking at about an $80,000 impact in that regards that we could apply directly to operating budget reduction. That's not a motion. It's a comment, just in terms of
You were suggesting what, a 3%?
3%, adjusting Cosmosphere to 30% and Stratica to 4%, and moving that 4% total to property tax reduction and making it 19%. So we keep the same areas, just readjust.
Thus directing more of it to, street and sidewalk improvements,
No, not
infrastructure.
just-
No, I was going to move it, I was suggesting moving it to property tax reduction.
Excuse me, I heard that, okay, very fine.
And that would actually amount to what in dollars?
Be about 100.
Oh, be closer to 100?
Yeah.
Okay.
What did I tell you?
You said
20,000.
20,000, you said 2 million
Be about
total,
80,
Yeah.
wouldn't it?
which would be about
80 then,
80.
About 80.
Because you're only talking about 4 or 5.
I was talking
Four.
4.
Or-
Oh, 4. I thought you
Total
said
of 4.
5. Okay, 4.
So
About 80.
80,000 would be less than what percentage of a mill?
Well, right now, as we're going to talk later, I think we've got like a 0.35 mil
0.35.
increase, and that's about $107,000. So this would that would essentially negate that to a point.
Yeah, okay.
Which is exactly what Steve was alluding to then by property tax reduction. It would
Right.
remove a property tax increase, mill increase.
Not totally.
Close.
Let me suggest that we defer this item until we have a discussion later on this morning on the budget itself. Because I think a lot of that's going to come into play.
I think it will,
After
yeah.
our budget discussion.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
I've got some points, I think
Yeah,
we all do, in terms of
absolutely.
where our comfort level is, so
Table it.
let's,
If they're just doing it till the end of the meeting, they can just say
yeah,
so.
what
We
is our,
just postpone it.
Well, I guess the question is,
Are we
are you
pushing
talking
the-
about tabling it for another meeting or just referring it to later?
I think immediately just till the end of the meeting,
Okay.
but then
That- that-
based
Then we
on that
can decide.
discussion.
just to defer until the
That
end of the
doesn't take a
meeting?
motion of any kind.
Okay.
Pardon me?
Okay.
All right, that doesn't take a motion, we can just defer this and
Next item.
incorporate this discussion into our budget discussion.
Okay.
Out of
Later.
curiosity, what is our drop dead line
Yeah,
for
what's our
voting
drop
on
dead?
this?
On this, We're ahead, but
We are ahead of the game.
Okay.
We passed the actual ballot question at the last meeting. I'm ahead of the game with getting this to you. I told you I would bring it to you.
Okay.
So we're ahead of that game
Okay.
by quite a
we're no
bit.
time, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So if we chose not to act on it today, that
You're
doesn't,
fine.
doesn't
We're still-
threaten this in any way? Okay.
Correct.
You've still got plenty of time to get it in the ballot.
All right, then, if that's acceptable, we will move on to the next item, Linda.
Item 8A, consider bid for wastewater treatment plant digester boiler replacement.
Good morning, my name is Brian Clinton, I'm the Director of Public Works. This project was bid on June 27th, and we had 3 bidders, with the low bid being by Utility Contractors Incorporated out of Wichita, Kansas. Their bid was just a little bit over $1 million. This project will be paid from a CIP account that's funded by our sanitary sewer utility. As far as the schedule go, we anticipate this project will be substantially complete by January of 2018, or about the middle of January 2018. And with that, we're recommending that the project be awarded to Utility Contractors, Inc., subject to all legal requirements being met. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
It's great that almost $500,000, well, 400,000, I guess, yeah. That the low bid was that much less than the engineer's estimate. But I'm wondering, that's almost a third, or approaching a third of the engineer's estimate. People that hungry, or what gives us this good fortune?
You know, it very may well be that, yeah, that contractor it fit well into their schedule. And as they evaluated the project, they came out and visited the site, got a good feel for the project, and were able to give us a really competitive bid.
Brian, are you concerned at all? There's a $200,000 difference, roughly, between utility contractors and both of the other
Right.
2 bidders. Confident that everything's there that needs to be there, and the competence and integrity of the company exists to
Yes,
deliver what we need.
worked with utility contractors out at the RO treatment plant
Okay.
on some project work out there, so we are comfortable with this contractor.
Ryan, I'm trying to find my notes here, but I think you said it in your memo. Is this for the 2 boilers?
Yes.
It is for the 2 boilers.
It is for the 2, yeah, we're replacing both boilers.
Replacing both boilers.
The one that's condemned and the one that was installed at the same time.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that clarification.
And with the bid process, of course, they're required to have a bid bond, and is there bonding, performance
There
bond
is
as well?
performance
Okay.
bond required as well, yes.
Okay, well, that should help offset if there's troubles
Right.
and things of that nature. Good price, so to speak.
You going to push that over to the street department? Be a good team player?
No. It's not gonna do that. It's dealt a pretty good dent in our reserve fund.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd throw that out there, Brian.
Yeah. Boilers going out. Most surprises are not good surprises, I've found in business and other places. With that in mind, I will move to approve awarding the project to Utility Contractors, Inc., subject to all legal requirements being met, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8B, consider bid for K61 and 4th Avenue intersection improvement.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Bruce Colley, Director of Engineering. What you have before you is a correspondence from the state of Kansas, and it's for the construction of the geometric improvements at K61 and 4th Avenue. And we've talked about this in recent past. This is for a northbound left turn lane from K61 onto 4th Avenue. And KDOT has been administering this project. And this correspondence, Apex Shears APAC Shears local division was the low bidder. Was recommended approval by KDOT in the amount of $93,430. And the city's share is $29,000. And there is funds available in our clink and our reserve projects. So would recommend that the mayor, and this is a bit unique, it's got two other members, as I recall, to sign the document, but would recommend approval and signature of the same so I can return those to KDOT. Any questions you may have, I'd be happy to answer.
How did that bid compare to what we anticipated the cost of the project to be?
It's the bid came in pretty decent. We had actually anticipated in the 115, 120 range, and the project will commence in October. It's got a 20-day time limit on it, so it won't take them very long at all. We originally had scheduled it for September, and then the light went off and thought about Miss Sankey and the state fair, so KDOT and I readjusted that schedule so we wouldn't impact that. As you recall in past conversations, this is an 80-20 split, and since the project was conceived back in 2013, prices have gone up a bit. Instead of the 80-20, there's actually an 70-30 split. So the city's responsibility went up approximately 10%.
All right, any other questions of Mr. Colley? Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the awarding of the bid for the K61 and 4th Avenue intersection improvements to APAC Kansas, Inc., Shears Division, at a total cost of $93,430, and with our responsibility being $29,000.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes, next item.
Item 8C, consider 2016 financial audit report.
Frank Edwards, Director of Finance. We've completed the 2016 financial audit with the help of Lindbergh, Vogel, Pierce Ferris, and Randy is here. Randy Hoffmeyer is here to answer any questions you may have about it. In reference to the audit of the financial statements, we were given a clean audit with no material discrepancies, so that's very good. And that's the same thing that we've had in basically all prior years. There was one additional audit on the federal awards program where they found that one invoice was not paid timely after we received the award from the federal government. It was paid 37 days after the invoice was received, or after the grant was received. It should have been paid 3 or 4 days after we received the grant from the state. But that was $10,000 and $10,053. So we were a bit late on that one. So they identified that as a discrepancy, and it was one of 14 cash draws they audited. Today we are here to answer any questions you may have regarding the audit of either the federal awards or the financial statements. And once the questions are answered to your satisfaction, we would recommend that you accept the audit report as presented. So we would take any questions you have about our audit at this point.
Randy, do you have any comments regarding the audit process?
Not really. The finance department does a great job. We're happy with that. Single audit takes a little bit of time, and when you run into issues like that that are required to be reported, drawing a blank, sorry. They're really, to frame that finding just a little bit more, the city requested reimbursement for that expenditure back in July of 2016 and kept questioning, asking about when they would be getting the drawdown. The drawdown was finally received in December, on December 27th, right after Christmas. So then it just got missed and was finally paid in early February.
Gotcha.
And certain controls or measures have been put in place to alleviate, or to stop that from happening again.
Taking proper corrective action for that. Any other questions?
Was that just from a random sampling and taking a look at
We look
several different draws versus you didn't look at every draw that was made?
We look at about every transaction.
Oh, you do? Okay.
When we have a major program, like the airport improvement program was, it was a big part of your federal expenditures. There aren't that many transactions to even look at, so it's easier just to look at everything.
Okay.
Well, I know in previous years, we've heard excellent findings in terms of the audit, but my question is basically unrelated to what is on the agenda in terms of ultimately approving the agenda, but a couple of questions. Lindbergh and Vogel do an excellent job, and we appreciate that very much. Typically, how long has our contract with Lindbergh and Vogel been, and have we considered at some point sending RFPs for considerations of other firms to consider doing the audit?
Okay, I know that the city has a long relationship with Lindbergh, Vogel, Pierce Ferris, and Pierce Ferris.
Right.
I've been engaged and been involved in the audit for probably about 5 years now. So during that, right before that time, I believe the city did consider RFPs.
We did consider
We
RFPs.
did. We did an RFP about, I don't know, Frank, was it 5 years ago, or were you?
That was before my time.
Well, okay, a little bit before that. We did, kind of the same question came up
Yeah.
6 or 7 years ago, and we did an RFQ, and essentially it landed back with the same firm. And it's probably good to do that every so often.
One of the reasons we chose not to do that this year was the fact that we were converting our financial software.
Right.
And that is
Correct.
would be a worse time to change auditors.
Okay.
When will that, I think you even spoke to it, when will that conversion be completed?
We are live as of July 1st on
Okay.
this financial software.
You're 4 days experienced.
Yes.
Hardly.
So we actually completed the project on schedule. So, and certainly with any
That's
new
incredible.
software implementation, there's some bumps. But we are working through them.
Good.
I know the council doesn't, we don't want to get into the internal management of your city operations at all, but whether or not it's appropriate to encourage city management to, during the next year, to submit an RFP or an RFQ, would that be in order?
Certainly.
I'm not averse to that.
That'd be the council's directive,
Is that
we can do
acceptable
that.
with council to consider that during the next calendar year?
We'd probably proceed with that, yet this fall through
All
that
right.
process, so
Yeah.
we're ready to
Right,
begin.
because you actually start
They
the
start the
audit.
audit, shortly after first of the year. So,
Yeah.
we can do that.
In a broader sense, does the city have a schedule of, or set contracts for a set period of time so that automatically an RFQ or an RFP comes along?
It's just
And-
been as we go.
As we go.
You look back in history, and I think we've probably did the RFQ. There was a time where I think we had the same auditing firm, we still do, for 20 years. We did an RFQ, and we go through that process, and certainly there's advantage to a firm that's familiar with the operation, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go through that process. But we really have no set policy on, every 5 years for every contract we have, we go out for an RFQ. But this would not be uncommon to do an RFQ for audit services for 18.
For 18?
I asked that
17, I'm
question.
sorry. Actually, it'd be for 17, yeah.
For 17, yeah.
All right, looking back.
Might we want to consider that there is kind of an automatic kick in unless the council extends something automatically type of thing, rather than it being a matter of coming up to say, well, why don't we do one now? So that's why I asked the broader
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
Whether
Valid.
contracts be set routinely at 5 years or some other length of time, so.
And are you suggesting specifically to auditing or to?
No, I'm talking about contracts in general.
In general, yeah.
The mayor's question related to doing audit work led me to think about other contracts that we
Broader.
routinely have on an ongoing basis.
Now, of course, this is an annual contract, right? I mean, we renew it
Renew it annually.
annually
Right.
anyway. It's not as though it is ongoing forever.
Yeah, it's really an engagement letter where they
Yeah.
define the scope of the audit and
Right.
the rates of the audit.
My question, more inclusive, or even broader than that, would be when internally you go through an RFQ and so on, how much time is involved internally that takes away from other productive things to an RFQ process?
Can't really quantify that, but yes, it does take time because you do have to send out proposals to various firms, whether it be a contract for the audit or any type contract, and you have to assess each one of those proposals as they come in. And then communicate back to the people that submitted RFQs as to.
I think we
whether or
want
not
to be prudent, but I'm not suggesting we add a whole nother level of different responsibilities for RFQs that becomes so time consuming that we're not applying the talent to where it needs to be applied.
Yeah, well, Mayor, we do a fair amount of that RFQs, if you would, through the bid process in purchasing with various contracts we have. So it's not like we just don't assess competitive bids.
Yeah. Easy for boards and so on to say, well, let's do this, and then, boy, we've added a whole nother.
Well, if that's a desire of the council, we can proceed that way. We've got the RFQ format that we used the last time, and we certainly would proceed that way and probably start that process relatively soon.
Is your comment, John, in reference directly to audit?
To the audit,
To the
yeah.
audit.
Yeah, just if it's, yeah.
Well, it appears it's been, what, about 7, 8 years?
I thought it was 5.
Little 5, I think it was right before maybe Frank joined us, so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, good discussion here on this separate item there. So is there a general consensus about that in terms of RFQ for 2017 audit?
Okay.
Go ahead and do
I
so.
think as long as it's been 5 years or more, yes.
Yeah, okay. I'll verify that, but
Okay.
I suspect it has been.
Quick question too, more of clarification. There's a bullet point somewhere I found in here. It says the city was not determined to be a low-risk auditee. Can a city qualify as a low-risk auditee if they put certain procedures in place? And I assume that just means a less intense audit.
Basically, what it means is there's less coverage required of those federal programs.
Okay.
Instead of 40% of the federal expenditures, we have to look at 20%. So in this instance, it really wouldn't make any difference.
Okay.
Because the airport improvement program was such a large percentage of your federal expenditures.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, other questions before we take action on this? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve and accept the 2016 financial audit report prepared by Lindbergh Vogel Pierce Ferris Chartered.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Please call roll.
Kairos de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Decken?
Yes?
Dave Line?
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
All right, next item.
Item 8D, discussion of 2018 budget.
All right, Mr. Deerdoff suggested after our last study session that we incorporate this into our continued discussion for the budget process here. And over the weekend, I think John provided to us some revisions to the last budget study session. So John, why don't you start there in terms of what has been done in terms of some revisions, and then we can open it up to open discussion here.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, really based on the direction that we had from the last council meeting was to figure out where we can find another $800,000 on the expense side of the equation, specifically to improve the ending balance, fund balance or cash reserves. So over the, over the past week or so, we were able to identify just a little over $600,000 worth of additional cuts, and those are reflected on your in your packet. Basically, that summary sheet, the list that keeps growing, I guess, as we look at it. So we add a little bit every time. And what we did find, although we had 600,000, I think the net effect was only going to be about 447,000 because we found in our cost allocation formula where we'd miscalculated charging out too much from one department to utilities, and that was about $162,000 difference. So the net effect of the work we did over the week was about $447,000, and that's reflected in your general fund summary there, where we improved our projected ending fund balance from just a little over $3 million to about $3.4 million. When we always look, we've talked a lot about the structural imbalance, spending more money than revenue we bring in each year. We improved that now to about a $1.2 million difference, spending more than reserves. And you equate that looking back to 17, we approved our 17 budget with a $1.2 million imbalance. So it's not uncommon, but what it eventually does is begin to spend down the fund balance. And one of the things, I've had conversations that I may not be as worried about this if I had a little more confidence that our sales tax numbers were going to improve the rest of this year and into 18. I just, there's nothing that tells me that that's probably going to happen. And so the figures we're probably looking at probably are going to be where we're at. Now, who knows? Something could change, but it's hard to make that projection. So that's really where we're at today, and kind of wanted to just see, what additional direction the council wants to go. Cuts, the first round of cuts on our spreadsheet there, going back, are the easy ones. The low-hanging fruit, if you will. The second round, June 20th, a little tougher, and we're just kind of working our way up to the top of the tree, and it gets a little tough as we move forward. And then we begin to impact probably programs and personnel services. So, but there's always additional work we can do. We just need to get the council comfortable as to where you want to be. So we want to talk about that today, and then we want to follow up, not right now, but want to follow up on our discussion on utility rates and kind of where we're at there, so we know there. And I think I had one other issue I want to talk about on stormwater utility, but so I don't know where you want to start on the general fund. Let's maybe focus on that.
Yeah, we can continue on that. I'd like to, for the benefit of the public, I think it's important to understand perhaps something that maybe you have not had access to in terms of, since we began the budget process for 2018, the staff has actually, from budget studies meetings of June 9th, June 20th, and June 27th, about $2.96 million has already been cut from the original budget proposal that we received back on June 9th. So to the credit of, and the direction of the council, to the staff, that they've identified $2.96 million of cuts, which is certainly substantial. I'd like to have the council refer to page 53 of the general fund summary of your document there.
You're talking about last meetings?
The one dated on the right-hand corner, 6/30/17. So that was our packet this week here. I went back to 2015 actuals, 2016 actuals, 2017 budget, 2017 revised, and then 2018. And we looked at these ending balances, and those balances, I think we've all seen those and recognized the trend, but I computed those to some percentages, so bear with me here. If you look at the funds available, the cash balance as of January 1 of each of those years, and then the revenues, you have funds available. So I took that number there and then divided that into the actual ending balance of December 31 for 2015, 2016, 2017 revised, and 2018 budget. And so in 2015, our ending balance percentage to funds available was 16.5% in 2015. In 2016, that number declined to 14.9%. In 2017, it declined to 12.9%. And in 2017, revised down to 11.6%. And in the proposed 2018 budget, we're down to 8.6% of ending balance to funds available. And that really hit home to me that I became increasingly concerned about this trend line. And I know we all collectively are concerned about that same thing, but when I computed it to percentages, I go, whoa, we've got some issues here. So, as a starting point, for further discussion, I have arbitrarily suggested that I'd like to have us work toward a goal for the 2018 budget in terms of a funding or of an ending balance of 10 to 11%. So that would increase that from 8.6% to 10 or 11%. So with that, we can have some further discussion, but in terms of a goal, the 8.6%, I'm just simply not comfortable. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that.
So would that equate to about a little over 4 million? I mean, what would 10% be?
10 to 11, yeah, I'm with you. That's my question as well.
Yeah, I think it's a little over.
A little over 4 million?
Right.
Oh, you mean the total ending balance?
The total ending
projected
balance
right.
goal.
That'd be about right, yeah.
I'm in favor of that too, John. And furthermore, what my bigger concern is that continuing along this trajectory isn't even an option next year because so much of what we're cutting is from the MRF.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we can't cut that forever. I mean, we have to replace those pieces of equipment at some point. So I'm not sure where that leaves us. But another question I had, just one thing under the general fund operations cuts, there was an $80,000 line item for work comp fund, and for some reason, and maybe I misunderstood this, I thought that that was a statutorily required bump in that fund, something from the legislature.
That was an issue with our fund balances in our work comp and the amount of money that we have reserves, if you will. And our city attorney was a part of that, and we received a letter from
Department of Labor.
Department of Labor asking us to take, seriously pointing out to look at our fund balance and how much money we had there. Quite frankly, we didn't really know that there was a requirement of any kind of fund balance in the work comp that was regulated by anybody, because I had not ever been contacted about that. So the proposal was, and I don't recall the initial increase. Seems like it was 100, and you remember what we started at, 180,000?
I don't remember the exact
Yeah.
figures. The important thing,
So-
council, was to reverse the trend
Yeah.
I
of
see.
reducing.
So we
the
didn't
fund.
have to make that all up in 1 year necessarily.
No.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and I think city
Gotcha.
attorney's correct, is to reverse that trend, and that, you know, that's why only 80 of that amount.
I
It's
see.
still a little bit concerning, so.
So would the original amount have totally got us to where, was it Department of Labor
Yeah.
wants us to be, or was it a partial move in that direction? And this means it'd take us additional years to get there.
There are some interesting computations, and I can show those to you later, but the computations that appear in those formulas aren't necessarily the amount that's required. Their real concern was that our fund was reducing rather rapidly over several years, and to reverse that trend. And the additional concern was the city has a tax lid now, where in future years and in past years, we would just make a mill levy adjustment and it's never an issue. But because of that tax lid, they themselves are looking at things differently for municipal finance. We'll be headed in the right direction. There was an immediate adjustment for the work comp fund this year, this budget year, and there will be an additional adjustment for next year. And I think as long as we continue that trend, it won't be an issue with the Department of Labor.
So it's similar to our looking at our ending
Exactly.
balance as well,
Balances,
same
yeah.
kind of issue. Okay.
Correct.
And work comp fund is not exempt from the lid, even though it has to do some with fire and police.
I don't believe it is.
Okay. I know there were certain exemptions for safety.
Yeah, I don't know that there's an exemption for our comp insurance.
Okay.
Well, it would
And
be
funding.
any expense increase to the public
Fire and
safety
police.
portion, fire and police
Yeah.
only. So, you can take that chunk out, and that would not be, because public safety was exempt from,
Right, and that's what I was alluding to. So,
and that's a cost that's allocated to the police department, to the fire department, so.
okay. When figuring how we fund the work comp fund, do we break it down into fire, police, and city
Yes.
and such? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
All departments are assessed.
perfect. Okay.
And fire and police are obviously a higher
Higher risk.
mod or whatever that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think I get it.
Mayor, clarification, and just using 10% because it's easier to compute in
Yeah.
my head.
Yeah, it's just arbitrary.
You'd be suggesting that we have an ending balance then of roughly 3.9 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
At 10%. Yeah.
Right, right. So we'd be looking at another 500,000 or so,
Yes, right.
okay,
600,000.
above where we are right
Where
now
we are
with.
right
okay,
now.
gotcha. All right.
I know that's smarts, but to attain that 10 to 11%,
Yeah.
that's what it would require.
And that has
Just
to
wanna
come
make sure I
either
understood what
from
you-
cutting expense or increasing revenue in order to get
The
there.
old revenue piece.
Revenue,
is just-
Revenue's
we
not-
said that
just
that's
not-
not
just not
trending
there.
upwards at all.
Just not there, is it?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's
Who knows?
property tax, sales tax, and franchise fees are that's what makes up the biggest portion of our funds. You get into some fee-based budgets we have, the golf course, Fun Valley, the animal shelter, what we're charging out there. But, we've looked at that a little bit. We can look at that again, and, you raise a little bit of revenue there that sometimes is hard to sell based on only the small amount you're even going to increase it by. But we certainly are going to look at that. In fact, looking at some of that on the golf side to see where we're at in relation to other municipal golf courses on our fees, because it's been several years since we've really even looked at that. So we'll be looking at some of that, and on animal shelter side, we've talked about that expense of that operation has gone up quite a bit over the last several years, and there's not a lot of revenue stream opportunity there, really. So, we have a dog tag requirement, and, about 100 dogs out of 10,000 actually get a tag. Now, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know the numbers that actually get a tag don't equate to the numbers of actual dogs that we have in our community. But there again, that's that's an enforcement issue, and how do you address that? So.
John, would you talk about let me get there, the housing inspector job consolidation?
Yes. We, of course, our housing inspector had left, I don't know, how long has it been, 4 months ago? Something like that. No, Trent's here, yeah. And so, and then Roy Little, retired after 40 years last week, and he's our code enforcement. And so Trent and I have been talking about the possibility of combining those two operations under one individual, because the housing and rental inspection program has really taken a different turn than what it originally was, approved as in terms of inspections and due to the state legislature and what we can and can't do. And so we wanted to not de-emphasize the rental inspection program or de-emphasize code enforcement. And we're going to experiment with the idea of doing that with one individual, with our other inspectors helping out when we need it. And I commend Trent for being willing to look at that as a possible, and that's a true program, or a true budget cut. Doesn't mean that we're not gonna come back, you know, in a while and say, boy, we're not able to keep up, because the rental inspection program, and we're charging a fee for that, and we're getting revenue for that, and so we need to make sure that we implement that as it's set out now. So that's just kind of where we're at, and kind of more of an, I don't know, experiment's the right word, but to see if that's something that we can do.
I think those are the type of efficiencies that need to be looked at across the board, like you're suggesting. And I commend you for that. Like I said earlier, when times are good, it's easy. You can do all the things, but times are not as good right now from a revenue standpoint. And so those type of belt tightening type situations need to be looked at. And it could be a situation we review that down the road or whatever.
Right.
But maybe times will be better at that point as well. We can look at that.
Does that address your questions?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
The bigger item,
Go ahead.
bigger item was, of course, is in the last round of reductions is reduce the street repair program by $200,000. Tell us what would happen there.
Well, you recall in 16 we added $400,000 to the street program to beat that up in 16. So we had that for 16 and 17. And so essentially it means just doing a less amount of street work each year. I had Brian calculate. Did you bring that? Yeah. You might share how much $200,000, how many blocks, and what we're not able to do. I had that somewhere, and I probably.
Yeah, $200,000. Basically, we did Monroe from 30th to 43rd this year, did a mill and overlay, and that is about $200,000. So
Mill and overlay.
Of a mill and overlay.
So it gives you a perspective of what
Right.
we can get done.
Visualize
There's still
it.
going to be street work going on.
Sure.
You just missed that, a piece like
Is that a
that.
mile?
Yes.
About a mile,
One
a little
mile.
over. 1
Yeah,
mile
about
exactly.
2 lanes for 1 mile.
2 lanes, 1 mile.
Remind me, and I know we've been over this ad nauseum, but what is the preferred amount of street miles you're supposed to be doing an average year? I don't know if that's based on our peer cities or whatever, but I know there's a number.
There is a number, and I don't have that in front of me right here. But we did, back in 2016, when we looked at what we were spending on street maintenance, we did an evaluation of our peer cities, and
Right.
we were significantly lower than what folks were spending. And by adding that $400,000, plus using money that we had in reserves from the quarter-cent sales tax, we were able to spend an equivalent amount of money. And so the last 2 years, 16,
17.
we've been spending what we think is the right amount of money for a street maintenance program. We feel like we've gotten a lot of good work done.
I think
those
it's
2 years.
noticeable. Yeah, very noticeable.
Yeah.
A lot of the main thoroughfares. It's
Right.
not true.
But when we did the state of the streets, that was been like 15, I think. We did the kind of analysis, we did the comparisons and per capita, and that 400,000 did improve our standing, if you will, in our peer cities of how much money we're spending on streets, and so.
Yeah. We also, back 5 or 6 years ago, we hired a company to come in and evaluate all of our streets and develop a pavement condition index. And I know Bruce is working with that same firm to bring them back. And it'll be really interesting to see how that new pavement condition index compares to what it was 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the average life of a street is what, Brian?
The average life, you know, a lot of it depends on how much traffic you're
Yeah,
going to get on
yeah.
that street. But on a mill and overlay, we'd expect to get 10 years at least. And in some cases, we'll get 15
Okay.
to 16 years on that street. All dependent upon how much traffic and how heavy that traffic is.
Well, I just want to throw out that I'm not comfortable with raising the mill levy to get the reserve fund up that high, nor do I think that that's legally a possibility without a referendum, because that would be another, 2 mills?
Well, as,
Yeah, it'd
Wow.
be $300,000 equals 1 mil.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
it,
No,
Just
I
a little
don't
shy of
think
2
we're
mills,
suggesting
yeah.
that even.
Okay.
But we'd have to take that to a vote.
Well, I think, when you look at, we talked and Angela provided that information that we had on the public safety. I don't remember what that calculation was, but it was $1 million of increase in fire and police that would be exempt. And so I mean, theoretically, you could improve that, but I think the desire was not to raise the mill levy, and that's
Not
kind of the
correct.
premise we've been working under. So, so the idea would be that this 500 or 600,000, at least as we go to work, would not be through new revenue, essentially.
So John, is your direction to move that way now? I mean, should we be trying to work through these cuts, or do we have time to send that back and do another study session?
Again, I just put this on the table, the goal of 10 to 11% ending balance for budget purposes. How we get there is going to be a challenge. There's no question about that. And we may all have our special projects and so on, but I think I would deem it the responsibility and the knowledge of our city manager and our finance department to come back to us with that plan of the 10 to 11% ending balance would be my directive, my suggestion.
I'm really comfortable with that.
Without a mill levy increase.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with that. I would agree. I would just hope that not all of those additional cuts were still from the MRF or the CIP, things that we would have to then just push off and address at a later time. Because we'll just be having this conversation next year if we continue doing
Well, I think we'll be having this conversation next year anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless of who's here. Yeah.
Unless sales tax really improves, unfortunately, my expectation is we're going to have a difference between anticipated revenue and anticipated expenditures again next year. So I think we will be having much the same conversation. John, there was one particular item, and I sent you an email, and I forgot to ask it at the study session here last week or so. But there's a street sweeper in the budget. And initially it was $200,000 from I forget where, and then in the second round you showed that as $100,000 from two different locations. And I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but the word contract caught my eye, and I understand that we're doing some contracting, and that anyway, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because we didn't talk about that, but currently we have one street sweeper that's operated by our street department, and we have a contract with a private individual for $100,000 a year that does primarily some residential, the residential part, and we kind of split the streets up. And so Brian and I were talking this year, and he's proposed that we buy a second street sweeper and we keep it in-house and we do it all. We would eliminate the $100,000 a year contract, buy another street sweeper for $200,000, and not adding any personnel. We would operate that with existing personnel. So we would operate the two street sweepers with our own folks, and not have the $100,000 a year contract. Street sweepers are probably the worst piece of equipment that we own in terms of maintenance. So we tend to run them until we're just barely keeping them together. And so the plan would be that we would continue to replace those on a more regular basis. But again, $100,000 a year in 5 years, that's $500,000 that you've spent on a contract service that you could use for equipment upgrades and those kinds of things. So, and originally it was all coming out of special street, which is property tax related. And so the proposal I made was to spend half of it out of streets and half out of stormwater, because I thought stormwater, street sweeping was a big part of our stormwater system, keeping stuff out of the storm system. So that, that's just kind of where we're at now on that. And if we wanted to continue as we are, then I guess we wouldn't purchase a $200,000 street sweeper, and we would continue a contract. So there's 100. Although, yeah.
There is a cost. You indicated that the personnel to operate the machine would come from existing personnel. But that begs the question, if we don't buy the street sweeper, do we need the person that's there doing whatever he or she does at the current point in time. And related to that, in my thinking, is there's a cost then associated. We're paying that person a salary, so there's salary and benefits. So there's a monetary value that can be attributed. So it's not just saving over the course of several years the contract cost, but we are going to be expending the personnel cost to this activity versus whatever that person is doing now.
Yeah, and I think Brian can address kind of talking about how that manpower might be allocated.
Yeah, and bring up a really good point, Steve. And I'd just like to go over a couple of the points I'd like to make, or the rationale I used for making this recommendation to John. First, the second street sweeper will give us more control over our sweeping program. We'll determine which streets need to be swept and when they need to be swept. Right now, we don't have that control. The contractor comes in when he wants to, and he sweeps. It'll provide us a backup street sweeper. And a good example of this is during the tournament this year. There's construction going on, and some of those streets around the sports arena were dirty. Our street sweeper was broken down, and our contractor was out of town. So we were not able to provide that service for the community. A second street sweeper means that we'll have a backup street sweeper, and when there are special events, we'll be able to respond for the community. A third issue is we've got numerous dump sites all over town that our contractor uses, and he dumps those street sweepings in those areas. We want to close those dump sites down because that creates a lot of extra work for our staff. We're sending a loader over to those dump sites plus dump trucks, and we're hauling those sweepings away. And what we plan to do is have a dump truck sitting in a central area where we're sweeping. We'll dump those street sweepings into that dump truck and then be able to haul those sweepings right to the landfill. So it's an efficiency issue for us. And then the cost analysis, we've run the numbers. We feel like we'll save $200,000 to $400,000 over 10 years. And that includes purchasing 2 street sweepers as an expense. So on top of that purchase, we feel like we'll be able to save $200,000 to $400,000. The contract's $125,000 a year, not $100,000 as well. And as far as the staff, a few things have changed for our street department. One, the slurry seal program, which we used to do exclusively during the summer, that is being replaced by the chip seal program now. We've been very pleased with how those chip seal streets are performing, and that contractor's able to come in and do them a lot quicker than we were able to do the slurry seal program, and be able to do them at the same cost that we were able to buy the materials for the slurry seal program. So that's freed up some staff time. The fewer dump sites is going to free up some staff time. And the last thing is our utility cuts for our water main breaks in residential street areas. We're now allowing the water department to patch those with concrete to the surface. And so that's freed up some staff time. We're not having to go in and put asphalt in those street patches. So anyway, that's some of the rationale behind the recommendation to go ahead and take that complete street sweeping program in-house.
Okay.
So in essence, you're not actually reducing personnel, you're combining positions much as Trent was doing with his, right?
That's correct,
Okay.
yeah. So this reduction in tasks that the street department is doing, that has freed up staff to perform
do
the
other.
street sweeping, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll just comment. It makes sense. I mean, even before having the additional information that you provide, Brian, I can do some math, and even with the questions I asked, I would have still been able to come up with some of the rationale that you vocalized for us. But I guess certainly the position, I had some questions about that, where that was coming from. So it, as you indicated, goes back to changes in our street repair program, probably is the biggest part. And then how do we do our own street sweepings dumping now? Do we associate a dump truck with our own street sweeper?
And that's just something we started to initiate this year.
Okay.
When we decided we looked at these dump sites all over town, and in some locations, they were pretty close to, ditches and Cow Creek.
Mhm.
We just didn't feel like environmentally that was the best thing to be doing. So we changed our process at that point.
Okay. Well, we
What are
could,
excuse me.
oh, I was going to say, and it's not necessarily a recommendation, but we could choose to save ourselves $100,000 this year by not buying the street sweeper this year, still having it in mind at a later time. Not necessarily that I'm proposing that, but that would be $100,000 savings.
But we would have
Or,
$125,000
that's right.
For your contract.
For
It
the
wouldn't be
contract.
125, it would only be 75, wouldn't it then?
You would
No,
lose
because you're still gonna have the
25,000.
contract.
The contract is 125 annually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the street sweeper's 200, so it would be a $75,000
Right.
savings, excuse me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But through the general fund,
Yeah.
we would lose $25,000 because 100,000 of that's coming from the stormwater utility.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
good point.
Let's take a 10-minute break,
Okay.
can we?
Thank you.
Okay. so we'll forget that. But that if there is enough of a consensus to direct city staff come back in 2 weeks with a revised budget based on this offering of this 10 to 11% ending balance. You want more discussion about that, or?
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, I just think you have to look at really setting some parameters on what we're gonna give up.
Sure.
And I think that's gonna be interesting to get some input on that.
And I would also add, and I think it was discussed too, that to get to that 10 to 11%, I'm not in favor of trying to raise revenue through additional tax.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of
I
us,
think
I don't
we've
think
said
any of
that,
us
yeah.
are.
Okay.
I'd keep it to 10%.
10%, parameters, retain the mill levy, the current mill levy.
Correct.
Is that
If possible.
Yes.
part of the parameters?
Well, the budget, as I understand it, still has a 0.35
0.35
increase.
Which
I
is-
indicated early on that's agreeable for me.
The problem I have with that particular piece of the puzzle is I know that and there was mention of it earlier, the utility rate fees that are going to have to be potentially implemented. And,
Yeah, I'd like to see no mill increase if possible.
right.
As low as possible.
That's my thought process.
And I considered a 0.35 pretty minimal, but that's where I'm at.
Okay.
I don't want to go above that, and I'm not suggesting we
Yeah.
go above it, but
So is that enough direction at this point of, and do we have sufficient time during the budgeting process before the public hearing to?
Yeah, I think,
Do what we're asking.
you know, looking at the calendar, the 18th would be our next opportunity, and then we would need to, and we have until August the, 15th, basically, to approve it and get it over to the county, so,
Are you
Was there a
here on
not-
the 18th? I apologize. Are you here on the 18th, John?
yes.
Okay, for some reason I thought you were going to be out.
Was there a
Okay.
not to
It was August
exceed
1.
deadline or something?
Yeah, well,
to
we
that
talked
effect?
about that. We'll need to figure out when we want to publish for our public hearing. And we can do that with a not to, and we could do that the way we sit today, but we couldn't exceed that, but we can cut. And so I think the way it's looking, because I am going to be out of town on the August 1st meeting, and I'd certainly like to be here for the public hearing on the budget. But so we could set the public hearing for August 15th, and it may be the August 1st meeting. I think, I can't remember the time. Anyway, there's a certain 10 days we have to have it published before the hearing, but I think we could approve the not to exceed public hearing notice on August 1st. And I would not be here, but Angela would be here to handle that, so. And then, you know, obviously, I don't know that you're going to want to raise it between now and then, but that would be could be a potential issue for you, so. So are we clear on that we'll come back on the 18th with some more work and then determine at that point if that's our not to exceed amount. Go ahead and get the publication ready, have that on the August 1st agenda for approval, setting the public hearing on August the 18th with approval of the
August
budget.
15th.
Or 15th, yeah, that Tuesday.
Oh, boy.
And you're gonna be looking
Nobody
at-
gets to take vacation.
and you're going to be looking at hitting that 10% of the
Yes,
whatever that term is, available funds.
fund balance, yeah.
Just a
Ending balance.
For the ending balance,
For
yeah.
2018 for budget purposes.
Right.
We're
But it's
gonna work
10% of
towards
the available funds
Right.
projected.
So we have a deferred item that we tabled on the proposed ordinance for the quarter cent sales tax and the allocation. And what are your desires there to defer that further discussion until the 18th? Or do you have more thoughts today?
I don't want to jeopardize the tax itself passing muster per se, and that's ultimately going to be in the hands of the voters.
Right.
For the $80,000 in savings per se, but 80,000 is 80,000 again.
But the question
Or,
is,
excuse me, savings,
do
but,
we lose $80,000 in potential sales tax revenue by the fact that the Cosmosphere or Stratica reduces their programming, reduces their access. I mean, I'm not sure 80, if it were 200,000, I'd say go for it. 80,000, I'm not sure. To me, it's a community perception issue.
I don't know that anybody knows the answer.
Yeah,
to
I don't,
your
I don't either.
question.
I don't
You
either.
know, again, I think it goes back in part to your point, Nancy, in terms of the parameters of this, getting to this 10%. What will that look like? Is it program? Is it
It's
personnel?
It's personnel
Is it
and program.
personnel? Is it wage and salary freezes? I don't know because
Yeah,
we haven't seen those things
No.
yet. But I suspect those all need to be on the table.
It's true, and we discussed that in
We discussed that
the
in
last,
study session.
trying to find all the squeezes out of the 25% portion of the budget without looking at the 75%.
75%.
Is a
I mean,
challenge.
Made an effort to do that by looking at the vacancy issue.
Yes.
But you're also going to have to look at your potential retirements, potential savings there, and I don't know whether you do that when you figure that vacancy.
We typically don't specifically look, we used to do that years ago back when I was an assistant, and we really don't look at specific individuals. We used to try to, particularly in fire and police, kind of
Yeah.
project, well then, they didn't retire, and so
Yeah.
now we just look at an overall kind of general number for salary savings.
So to revisit the quarter cent sales tax item as part of the staff's thoughts, or do we have specific directives on the quarter cent sales tax that we want to offer this morning?
I'd like for it to be on the table for staff to be able to take a look at it, and.
For the 18th,
Yes.
all right?
And again, you would
And-
suggest
yeah,
that,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. You would suggest that if the allotment numbers were changed, that all that be directed towards the property tax reduction on the sales tax piece? Am I saying that very plainly?
Yeah, I think that was Steve's original
Yes.
intent.
Yes. Yeah, taking it up to 19%, because I think it's 15 now. I don't have that in front of me now, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I would be open to that, again, with the utility rate, potential utility rate increases in mind, that could be coming. I don't want to give them the double, triple whammy, so to speak. And if that helps them on their, so to speak, on that, then we don't have to have that mill increase and different things like that, if I'm not speaking very plainly.
Again, what is that 4% generally?
We were about, 5% would be a little over 100.
A little over 100, okay.
100,000.
All right.
Approximately 80.
Yeah,
Approximately 80.
Approximately 80, right.
All right. Any other?
Well, it may be relevant for me to disclose that I am on the Cosmosphere board, so I'm not sure I can be completely objective about this. I'm fine with deferring it. I'm fine with voting on it.
So we would anticipate seeing that potential 4% incorporated into attaining our 10% on July 18th. Is that
Yes.
Up for discussion.
up for discussion?
Yes.
So
Does that give you enough direction?
Yeah, and I think at this point, the council might take action to table that
All right.
item until July the 18th.
And would we reach out to those organizations? Okay. I would move that we table the quarter cent sales tax discussion until the next meeting on July 18th.
Second.
July 18th. All right, any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Wine?
Yes. All right, is there any, you have some additional
Oh,
items on the
just-
water and street.
Well, and I think we can probably talk again about that on the 18th, but just recall the last conversation we had on utilities back, we had the study session solely on that, and you guys, I don't remember the exact numbers, but we had the large first-year increase in sewer rates and then zero for a couple of years. And we came back with in 2018, sewer at 11%, and then for the next 4 years, 5% roughly. And then water was 5.5% for the next 5 years. And I think there was a conversation from the council wanting that first year of the sewer at the 5% level too, as opposed to the 11%. So,
Or at least take that 11 and spread it out.
spread it out, yeah.
So that all 5 years
So-
or whatever it is, we're roughly equal.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and we can do that and I think probably maybe today or maybe on the 18th, we can kind of share with you what the impact of that is.
The
And I
impact
think
of
we've
that is.
explained that since
That
it
would be
just
helpful.
reduces our capital improvement side of it. But so we're on the same page. Water 5.5 each of the 5 years, and then sewer we're looking at of taking that 11 and spreading that out equally to where. Okay, I just want to be clear on that, and we'll do that, and we'll highlight that for the 18th just to make sure we're all on the same page there.
And Brian, you'll be able to show the impact, the difference, I don't know, cost savings or whatever it is, that versus giving it a cash injection up front.
Right.
So what is that costing us every year
Right.
as we
Right.
defer that?
Yeah, what it's cost us over that 5-year period.
Yes, please. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, okay, is that,
I think so, yeah.
that sufficient for July 18th?
Yep.
All right, are there any other items, council or Mr. Deerdoff, on the budget discussion this morning?
I have nothing.
No,
Nope.
I think that's enough. huh?
and plenty
Yeah.
That's plenty.
for a day.
All right, then let's go to the next item.
Item 9, report of city officials.
Okay, Council Jay, do you have anything?
Nothing this morning, thank you.
Happy belated Independence Day.
Very good. Okay, Steve?
Related to Independence Day, a very nice fireworks display
Yeah.
last night, and our thanks to
Midwest Ford and
Midwest.
Toyota Superstore. Yeah, Ken Heineman came forth and they put up $5,000 of our total $15,000 program.
Okay.
So when I watch fireworks, I do it a minute. It's $1,000 a minute. That's how I watch it. So, and,
That's about right.
But it's about right. So
But we had more fireworks stations.
we had
Vendors
6
this year.
Yeah.
this year,
Yeah.
which really offset our cost
Right.
because we had only budgeted for 2.
I was gonna say, I could have sworn I'd seen more this year.
No, I was
Yeah.
surprised because, you know, when we went to Safe and Sane, we had 7 or 8 of when we were just doing everything. And we're down to 2 for
Yeah.
2 years maybe, but we had 6 this year.
That's great.
Does that have a huge sales tax? Not huge.
Is it 2,500
Well,
apiece?
It's more than what they pay to set the,
It's the okay.
$2,500
Permit.
Permit.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
So we get $2,500 per cracker
Site.
stand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know we paid a pretty penny. I got kids still that age,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I was kind of thinking about that as I was handing my cash over. How much of this is coming back in sales tax and so on and so forth. But
Way to
I
justify
digress. Yeah.
But it would impact sales, assuming people pay sales tax. but
Right. For
assume
a
they do.
4-day window,
Yeah.
it might be a little spike or something there.
Again, thanks
Yeah,
for the
okay.
support
Yeah.
from the community.
Yeah, very much.
Nancy, did you have anything?
Nothing. It was a very loud display. I will say that. I wasn't there, but I could hear the reverberations.
Good.
So,
The only other item I have is that while the chief beer is here, I'd just like to say how impressed that I was and others on the council who who attended the graduation ceremony
Yeah.
for the
Yes.
5 firemen. And it was a very impressive ceremony, and I was really taken in by it, and your comments were very, very appropriate, so thank you for that. And maybe that, I don't know if that can ever get on the Welcome Channel or whatever, or cable, but the folks that ought to see that ceremony in its full gala. So it was wonderful, wonderful presentation and graduation, so.
And informative.
And very informative, yes.
yes,
right.
very informative.
Okay. John, do you have anything?
Just a couple things. We just, as mentioned earlier, went live on Munis, our new software financial package. Went live July 1. And I want to commend Todd Davis and mainly Angela Richards. She's been the one that really is kind of the forefront of this implementation. I don't know how many meetings she's been in through the training, but I definitely have no pay. I had to do one session that was like 3 hours, and she's been in all of them. And we started training, a year ago maybe, or not quite?
The process started around October.
Yeah, October. So those guys have worked really hard, and of course, as we just implemented it July 1, it'll be interesting to see how we all react to our invoices and how we do our requisitions. But those guys have did a really great job of kind of leading us all through that process. So, and we just now started the utility billing portion of implementation training now, and we'll go live with that. Care to make a prediction? April, so it'll be after the first year. So, okay. So we won't hold you to that, but anyway, so it's just but it's a big deal, and the council, obviously, you guys allocated. I think when we're all said and done, it's probably a $400,000 effort that has been needed for some time. But there's a lot of work to the implementation side of that. So, also while we're on finance. Frank Edwards' last day will be tomorrow officially, and I was sending out that email to the council yesterday, and I think I told you guys about this a year ago, because now Frank is announced that he was going to retire, and partly why we brought on Angela Richards, kind of a succession plan, and so she's been under our wings for almost 2 years now, and so she'll take the full load effective tomorrow, and. But we want to thank Frank for his years of service, 5 years with the city. He came to us from the private side and picked up municipal finance rather quickly, had a lot of questions that he had. Why do you guys do it this way? But he's done a great job for us, and we're certainly going to miss him. But it was nice that we were able to bring Angela in, kind of here and just be able to pick up the ball without a whole lot of difficult transition. So, we'll wish Frank well. We're going to have a little luncheon for him up at the sports arena at noon today with our department head meeting, and kind of wish him the best. So the last thing.
Thank you, Frank, and
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you,
Yes, enjoy.
5 years of service, enjoy. Yes.
Yeah.
Good work. Good working with you.
July 18th, of course, we've got a big meeting here, and then we've got our joint meeting with the county. And I kind of want to just briefly talk about, one of the topics is they want to talk about the 43rd K61 bridge. I'm not sure how we tie into that, but, that's a bridge that they're talking about closing. And there's a lot of comments on that, so there'll be a conversation on that. We want to talk a little bit about LEC access and as it relates to our potential work there with the police department, some improvements to the station. I'm not sure where that conversation will go, but we'll start that. And then finally, I think
What's his name?
Deck had asked, what's his name?
That guy.
Councilman Deck had asked about talking to the county about some housing programs, and I don't know, Steve, if you've got some specific or just in general, but we can certainly have that on the agenda as well.
If you all are interested, and it's not that I have specific, let's do this program, but and I've had an opportunity over the last maybe year or so to talk with a couple of the commissioners. And then there may be some willingness to at least discuss it, and what I'm hopeful for is down the road some financial support from the county side in terms of housing issues that we're struggling with.
Okay, hope springs eternal.
Yes.
Did we reach consensus on the joint city-county roads either? Will that be something that's going to be discussed? Or?
We did.
We're good. Okay.
We did the kind of the informal agreement that I've signed and Gary Meager signed for the streets that were affected this year, and then we'll be bringing back a formal agreement that addresses all the others. And the ones we did short term were ones where we're doing asphalt work this week.
Currently,
yeah.
Okay.
So we've done a portion of that, but the formal agreement that deals with 6 or 7 of the other ones will happen later this summer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Speaking of city-county cooperation, something that we might consider in the future for another city-county luncheon meeting, and Jan and I have had that little conversation, and it's incorporated into our comprehensive plan, but this whole jurisdictional, extraterritorial jurisdiction item, I'd like to have a conversation about it, certainly some input and some thorough thoughts from you, Jenna, in terms of planning and impact and the upside and the downside of all of that, just to get it out there and have a conversation. I'm not sure what the appetite of the county is on that, whether I know
Probably
in
pretty
years
small.
past you had a conversation.
We
regarding
did.
that. Maybe things have
Yeah.
changed. I don't know.
Things probably have changed. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
totally different cast of characters,
Yeah.
and thinking back on that, I think every other city in Reno County has
310.
ETZ except Reno County, and I think that's right, isn't it? Yeah. So it's a conversation. Now, we did make a step forward and I lost the term of what we just did.
Area of influence.
Area of influence, that's right.
yeah.
We did make a step forward here.
So we made a step forward where we were able to comment on some specific development, and but certainly if that's a desire, we can have that conversation.
Well, maybe not at the
next
Not-
meeting.
not at this
No,
meeting,
not
but
this meeting
yeah.
here.
We got
but
a lot on
at
plate.
some future meeting,
Yeah.
assuming we have one, we might want to put that
Okay.
on our radar.
Okay, and that's all I had, Mayor.
Great.
Very good. So, all right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.